First of all, let me thank everybody for coming today. I really do appreciate it. My name is Marty Warren, and I am the Canadian National Director for the United Steelworkers. I'm happy to be joined here from, among others, but Kalpona Akter, Executive Director of the Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity. Today, our union, along with the Canadian Labour Congress, has filed a complaint with the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise, or acronym CORE. We filed a complaint against Marks and its parent company, Canadian Tire. In our complaint, the USW and the CLC have brought evidence to the CORE that shows Marks and Canadian Tire Corporation have failed to ensure the workers in its supplier factories are paid living wages. The complaint alleges that this is a contravention of the international human rights standard. Women and men employed in Bangladesh garment factories, like those used by Marks and Canadian Tire, live in poverty. That is not new news. The poor living conditions of Bangladesh garment workers are well known. Despite that, and our repeated attempts to engage with Canadian Tire to acknowledge that they have failed to take meaningful action to address human rights harms it causes and contributes to in the supply chain. Canadian Tire has influence and resources to ensure that rights are respected. They need to be pushed to live up to their responsibilities. That is what the CORE complaint is about. Let me turn this over to Kalpona Akter for a moment to remind us of what garment workers in Bangladesh face each and every day.
Thank you, Marty. The women and men who make clothes and sold in marked Canadian stores work 6 days per week, 10 or 12 hours per day, but earn wages so low that they cannot escape poverty, no matter how hard they work. Many garment workers live in a overcrowded housing, typical one rented room or one room tin shack. They have to share a kitchen and share latrines with several other families. Many face a constant struggle to feed themselves and their families and live one step away from abject poverty. Women are particularly vulnerable to abuse in the factories and at home. The legal minimum wage for entry-level job, just 8,000 taka per month, which is our currency. That is less than 100 Canadian dollars per month, and much less than $1 per hour for a 10-hour a day. Any garment worker will tell you that isn't enough. Even those workers that earn more than legal minimum wage live in poverty. Industry average wages are hard to find, but our best information pegs that the average monthly salary, including overtime, for a female garment worker is in the industry belt outside of Dhaka at 12,673 taka. That is 173 Canadian per month, less than $1 per hour. That is far short of any estimate of the living wages needed to provide a decent life. A living wage for a worker, 8 hours per day, it has 6 days per week, would be 4 or 5 times than this. I am encouraged that the USW and CLC has taken a step to filing this CORE complaint. I hope it will initiate a process that sees Canadian Tire to fully accepting its responsibility to ensure workers in its supply chain are paid living wage. The CORE complaint underlines the need of Canadian federal government to introduce legislation that will require Canadian companies including Marks and Canadian Tire, to prevent human rights harms and undertake due diligence. If legislation such as proposed in Bill C-262 were in place, Canadian Tire would be forced to proactively address issues of human rights and poverty wages in its supply chain, and a court complaint might not have been necessary. Thank you.
My name is Doug Olthuis, and I just want to review some of the a few points in our core complaint. We know that Marks relies heavily on supplier factories in Bangladesh to manufacture clothes for its own brands, including Wind River, Denver Hayes, Dakota, and Helly Hansen. Marks has full control over its own brands, including product specifications, quality requirements, and it decides where to manufacture and how much to pay suppliers. It is Mark's own brands that the core complaint focuses on, not all garments sold in its stores. If Mark's suppliers pay legal minimum wages or pay wages at or near industry averages, wages received by employees in those factories do not meet living wage benchmarks, and they do not receive wages in a standard work week sufficient to pay the costs of a decent life. Marks has a responsibility under international human rights standards, including the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, to ensure that it does not contribute to human rights harms in its supply chain. In our core complaint, we contend that Marks and Canadian Tire have failed to do that. Unlike other leading Canadian retailers and brands, Marks does not disclose the names and locations of its supplier factories. In the research for this complaint, the USW used shipping data available from a subscription from Panjiva to identify 40 factories in Bangladesh that have shipped to Marks. Based on that list, we commissioned a custom data run from the internationally respected Garment Worker Diaries to match Marks factories to those in their database. The data showed that although workers employed in Marks suppliers did receive slightly higher wages than the industry-wide average, wages are still nowhere near living wage benchmarks. Even by the most conservative living wage benchmarks, wages would have to double. Kalpona just said they have to triple or quadruple. Worker advocates say that's not enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. So with our complaint, we're asking the Corps to investigate the extent of the human rights harms in Mark's Bangladesh supply chain. We're asking the Corps to recommend that the company take action to compensate workers for past harm and immediately negotiate with Bangladesh unions to ensure that in the future, all workers in the supply factories are paid a living wage. I want to note that the USW is able to file this complaint only with the support of the Independent Bangladesh Garment Workers Union and federations. Finally, echoing Kalpona, let me emphasize the importance of the Canadian federal government passing a law that goes beyond reporting and places clear obligations with penalties on companies to respect rights and undertake proper due diligence. So thank you for that. We have with us today several people who can answer questions or who will answer questions. Our USW legal counsel who has drafted the complaint, Aaron Emily Dwyer from he's the policy director of the CNCA. She can speak on human rights and due diligence legislation. Kalpona, who you've met, who spoke already today, along with Doug, who you've just heard from, and other staff from the Steelworkers Humanity Fund, who oversee the research and the complaint. So we are open for questions. Thank you.
And reporters online, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function to notify us of your question. Si vous avez une question, vous êtes en ligne, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction lever la main pour nous aviser de votre question. no questions, this concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Good job, Marty.